Hey folks, it's time for the quote of the day, and today we are going to be quoting a legend, and that's not an exaggeration, quite literally a legend. Now, a good portion of what is legendary about this man more than likely didn't happen, but that doesn't matter because he is an American folktale. He is a myth. He is, I just did Doc Holliday the other day, and it was kind of the same thing. We tend to take our people that have done anything in our country and we turn them into these giant folk heroes, and perhaps none of them more so than Davy Crockett. Today is Davy Crockett's birthday, and we're going to talk about him a little bit because if you're my age, you definitely grew up hearing, about how he killed a bar when he was 3 and shit like that, stuff like that from the Disney song and all this stuff. Like we knew who he was. Like he was absolutely a legend, and there were cartoons about him, and it just everybody knew everything about him. Everybody knew about the Alamo and all this stuff. It's weird. It's weird how much of it wasn't actually true, but we just all believed it was because we were told it was. But it was like so fantastical that we were like we never even second guessed it. We were just like, oh yeah, okay, that makes complete sense. Yeah, totally killed a bear when he was 3, right? Like now, okay, let me put it this way: Davy Crockett is somebody that I have a very, I don't know, a very mixed reception to, because while I absolutely respect the man in terms of the things that he would come to stand for and stand against, he's very problematic in his youth. And as somebody who is an indigenous man and recognize that part of me, he's a little problematic. That, and he was a slave owner. Like, not a lot of slaves. He wasn't like, the father of our country, George Washington, but he did have a couple of slaves that basically took care of his home in Tennessee. And so I think that that's important to understand. Like, he was never a vocal abolitionist. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons that he went to Texas and ended up dying in the Alamo is to fight for Texas independence, which Texas was fighting for independence for slavery, much like the rest of the South. And I think that there's people out there, there's a lot of Texans out there that don't know that or just refuse to accept that as a reality. But that is the historical facts tell us that there's documents and things like that. We know that Texas was trying to basically pull itself away from the abolitionist Mexicans, far be it. But that's what they were doing, and they wanted to be able to have slaves. And then Davy Crockett was like, "Well, fuck, nobody likes me here. Fuck you guys. I'll see you in hell." Right? Like, well, and that's not the exact quote. What he said was, "You guys can go to hell. I'm going to Texas," and that was an exact quote. Um, so let's talk about the legend, right? Let's talk about what we do know and what we don't know. Now, he wrote a book about himself, his autobiography, and he wrote this. I want to say he was about 40 or in that area, like 37 to 40. Um, when this was released. So a lot of the stories that you hear about Davy Crockett are from his youth. All of these stories about how he would go bar hunting, and he would go off and he would go to people's like lands where there were a bunch of bears, and he would go like this was all done when he was very young, and there were what we know of it is all basically through word of mouth and through like there's no record of it. He didn't come back and have a bunch of bear skins and stuff like that's just not something that happened. And so, who knows? Who knows how many he killed? We know he killed some, like there's witnesses. We know that he did kill bears, and that is something that not everybody could do. We know that he was good with a rifle, and we know that he was a good tracker. As a matter of fact, like I said, one of the issues I have with him was the fact that he fought under Andrew Jackson in the Creek War, and he fought and he killed a lot of Native Americans, a lot of Creeks. And but what happened was, see, what had happened was, he actually didn't partake in a lot of the fighting. He had a distaste for that particular aspect of it. So a lot of his legend actually came from the fact that he would hunt and he would keep the troops fed that way. A lot of people spread his legend because he would go off into the wilderness, and he even said it multiple times. I don't really like killing Injuns, is what he called them, but he didn't like killing Native Americans, so he instead would go off and hunt. And that's where a lot of those stories come from. Was he would come back with bear meat and deer meat and raccoon meat, and that's where the coonskin cap comes from, right? So a lot of these legends come from that younger period of time, and then he was like, well, people like this. And you got to remember, like, this dude comes from like absolute poor everything, right? Like, his father owed money. His father literally sold him into indentured servitude to get out from under debt. That's how poor they were. He sold his own son to get him out. So Davy Crockett like spent years of his life I think at the age of 8 he was sold into indentured servitude. And there was just, I mean, the dude had every reason to want to take this, kind of these kind of murmurings of legend and build them up and make them what they were. But again, he didn't do a lot of this stuff. It was all just stuff that he made up or other people made up, and he was like, yeah, that totally happened. Who can blame him? I don't blame him. That's part of the legend. But the reason why I say I do appreciate him is because when Andrew Jackson became president, uh, Davy Crockett actually was in favor of him. But as soon as Andrew Jackson put forward the what was called by our government the Indian Removal Act, Davy Crockett stood against him, and actually ended up becoming very unpopular for a period of time because he stood up for Native Americans. He stood up for Indians, as they were called, and he tried to fight against that. He spoke out against that. He tried to lead people against that. As a matter of fact, after he lost his seat in Congress, because of his stance against Andrew Jackson, which was very popular, he would go on to join, I think, the Whigs party and represent Tennessee in that way. And it wasn't until he had basically burned all those bridges through being a stand-up person, through being somebody that would look at a situation and try to be on the good side of history. He had burned a lot of bridges with a bunch of racists, basically, in Tennessee. And that's when he said, to hell with the rest of you. And he said this to his constituents. This wasn't like just, to some random person. He said, to hell with all of you. I'm going to Texas. And then he went to Texas. And as we know, he perished in the Alamo. Now, we don't know how he died. Most people that, grew up with the stories believe that he died fighting against the horrible Mexicans. And when they found his body, there were a circle of 16 dead Mexicans around him. And he was there, his body beaten because he had, somehow taken down. But we don't know. We don't know. The reality is there's enough historical claim to that story that it could very well be true. But there's also historical claim to him being executed. It doesn't matter which one you want to go with. You can believe in the legend, or you can believe in what is probably more than likely true because, well, it kind of sucks. And he was just executed. Either way, he died at the Alamo, and he died fighting at the Alamo. So it doesn't really matter how he died. He died, and his body was burnt. And nobody, we have caskets, but we don't know if any of the stuff in the caskets is his. We have like his rifles, and we have the knife that he supposedly used, but that's all we really have. And the legends. Now, I'm leaving you with his quote, with just a word. This was his motto. This was his creed. This is what he lived by. And I think that for all of us in today's world, despite how troubling some aspects of his life could be, we need to remember this. And remember that in the legend of Davy Crockett, perhaps the most important thing we can remember isn't all the fantasy, but his words instead. Davy Crockett once said, actually, Davy Crockett said all the time, be sure that you're right, then go ahead. Be sure that you're right, and then go ahead. Now, he means move ahead, right? Like, make sure that you know that what you're doing is right, and then just do it. Don't ask for permission. Don't worry about it, because you know you're right. And there's something to this. I know there are people out there that, a lot of people have like different takes on what's righteous and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, I think we know. Davy Crockett knew, and he followed his heart. And in some ways, he redeemed himself. And even the Cherokee Nation sent him a letter of thank you. And so on his birthday, thank you, Davy Crockett. Happy birthday. And the rest of you, please, take care of yourself. Take care of others. I'll talk to you soon.